Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Doctor Who in Review. My name is Lewis, and I'm from Man Bites Media.
And this is Nisha M., your geek mom from Diversely Geek.
And we got two amazing guests with us today. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm a nerdy chap here helping out Man Bites Media, and I'm going to be reviewing with you today.
Awesome.
What do you mean? You're not helping out Diversely Geek, nerdy chap?
That too.
I have to do it. Okay. and our fourth.
Sure, I'm an equal opportunity person.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
It sounds about right.
And then I'm Joe with Diversely Geek. I feel like I'm less of a guest now. I'll be reoccurring.
Yes, you will be reoccurring now. If not, we'll force you to be. So today we're reviewing season 11, episode 6, Demons of Punjab. This was an interesting episode. Nisha and Jody, I want you guys to start off this episode and give us the lowdown on it.
Oh, wow. Okay, no pressure on that one.
Always pressure, especially for me.
So, gosh, where to begin? Where to go from there? So the Demons of Punjab, by the way, I'm going to be politically very PC on this one. No, it's just goodness. There's just so much.
Well, let's start from the beginning. What did you like of the introduction of the episode, how it started, and then let's move from there into the structure of the rest of it.
I like that we're seeing more of Yaz's family, and I like that. I mean, we already know that Ryan only has pretty much Bram at this point, so I really like that we're still getting these little tidbits into the companions' lives.
Yeah, it's really interesting where we get an opportunity to, again, look at the microcosms of the companions, the lives that they live in, and to get an understanding of their social interactions, their cultural interactions, and to really, I think, get to love who they are. I think that a lot of the fandom had been asking for more insight into Yaz's life and Yaz's background, and this was a really great. I mean, it was an unbelievable, not great. It was just an unbelievably emotional and poignant way to really give us insight into who she is, and an insight that she didn't have any idea about. So we get brought on a journey with her as she learned about the history of her grandmom, her Nani. So that it's just incredible. And I will say, as an Asian American immigrant myself, I can identify with Yaz not really having a true knowledge of my own cultural history, because the way that we were transported and migrated to the country that we're from left a lot of our history in the dark, in the same way that Yaz is in the dark. So I think a lot of people may not know that that's actually a bit of a concern or an issue for people like us who migrants who don't have the full knowledge of their background. So
I think it's interesting.
I know a lot of people are familiar with that in terms of other cultures, but definitely through Indian and Pakistani heritage, it's definitely something that is kind of the same. And having that history of the slave trade and getting moved around, and British history, and having a sort of being lost in translation in terms of family heritage. So I thought it was a really cool concept in the first place to even touch on that. I just like that we're seeing a family. I think it kind of gives us a feel kind of akin to Donna-esque, like when we at least had Wilf. I do like that we're seeing a little bit more about the inner workings, like the depth of Yaz, because I feel like we've seen a lot of depth between, from Ryan and Graham in terms of like their personalities and their virtue in the character. And I think it was cool to see Yaz faced in different dilemmas of different situations, and knowing like what for her is, well, I want to do this. Like she doesn't really. It's not like we see her ask for things often, right? So I think it was really cool to see her ask the doctor, like, "Oh, come on, please,"
Yeah, and both Graham and Ryan are totally on board for giving her this opportunity to experience something. So I would say iconic, So
I definitely agree with that. I think that I love the backdrop that they put this episode in. I love that they put this in such a very much a turmoil area, but period of time, but also the fact that they put it right at the beginning of it, where this is an aspect of history that a lot of people don't and are not familiar with, because it's one of those that have just been completely wiped from the history books, like most of Asian history, unfortunately, like the raping of Nanking, all these situations where it was literally genocide that was committed, and it's been washed over by history. And I love that Doctor Who made this a spotlight of choosing this one point in history to observe.
Yeah, definitely. Like that was actually my like one of my first thoughts was, oh my gosh, this is so like Doctor Who, but I felt like more in a classic feeling of Doctor Who in terms of like, oh, we're getting transported to a time and place, and we're having sci-fi. It's a new monster, or race, and we're seeing science, and I absolutely loved it as an overall in terms of the sci-fi and the intriguing subject matter. In terms of the actual like subject matter, I mean that's a whole discussion. I do have to say though, immediately seeing that it was written by by Patel, I was like, oh, okay, good. Immediately I was like, okay. Yeah. Like I didn't even think twice about it when we saw the preview last week. It's like, okay, this is gonna be kind of cool. And I didn't even think that it would have been anyone other than Chibnall that worked on it, but I'm glad that it was, because you can see it as as an Indian, just having the culture kind of seep through kind of every aspect of the filming in very subtle ways.
Yeah.
There were so many little
nuances.
Like nuances, but like in the cinematography alone, like there were very specific shots that I think were reminiscent of like old time, like rather classic Bollywood.
Yes.
Shots.
Very much so.
And I thought it was brilliant. Specifically the scene like when the men on the horses come at the end. I was like that.
Yep.
With that lighting. Oh yeah. My God.
You have no idea how.
You have no idea how classic that is.
It is literally like any person that's seen a classic like Bollywood movie,
especially one that references wartime in the way that this did, you have to know that Chibnall pays a major homage to.
This was completely out of Chibnall's hands. He did the underwriting on it and made sure it was following the guidelines that were needed. But this was completely up to Patel to go his way, and then the director took it completely.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely.
It's like he did a brilliant job.
Oh, 100%.
As a director of it, I'm sure he had honestly, I'm sure he had a lot of influence in even the music. The music. Jesus. I thought they did an absolutely stunning job. That was actually really what made me tear up was the use of the. So in Indian music, the two things that are used the most to convey emotion or action that are like staples of Indian, or I guess we say Indian, but now it makes me think, well, Indian Pakistani, like in
No,
terms
it's
of general,
it's Asian
South Asian film and music is a tabla and then alaps in music. So the tabla is the drumming noise that you hear and kind of builds some suspense, or it's basically during any action or in between action, and then during any of the more emotional parts of the filming, or where they have those scenes with the like the lighting from the sun, or just kind of like the really like beautiful shots of cinematography with nature. The voice with the like violin or string-esque sound and the strings in the background, those are staples of classic.
Right. You heard I'm pretty sure you heard sitar, pretty sure you heard santoor. I'm pretty sure you heard more than sure that you heard sarangi as well, which are all classical Indian instruments, or Asian, Pan-Asian at that time, that were used, as I think I had commented earlier, that they're used to emote spiritual essence. And so it's not just, hi, let me play this music in this moment. It's about creating a moment of movement, a moment of revelation, a moment of emotion, and a moment of spiritual, like I said, spiritual essence, which really means in encompassing the brevity of that moment, is, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure how we want to kind of break it down here, but I know we were starting with the beginning, but it's more of like,
no, that's beautiful. Honestly, I love how you broke down the music of it, because that played such an important role in this. The cinematography in this was 100% Bollywood. The little oversaturation of the corners and the kind of out of focus edges to the frame, and then this like yellow tint and kind of bluish greenish colors that are throughout the film. That it's classic, real, like high budget drama, Bollywood style, and it chose the best of Bollywood and brought it out in a Doctor Who episode, and it showed these emotions of these characters, this range of characters in this episode that I have not seen in a very, very long time. And I don't know if it's just me like feeling overly emotional, but wow, this episode hit me hard. I was literally like, there's a couple of lines that I wanted to honestly go through, because they were the most impactful for me. Was one where he says, live this moment. And just with the current events going on today, Monday, we just witnessed the passing of Stan Lee, a man that's literally a legend. And this episode was the perfect episode to watch on the day as a remembrance to him, honestly. And then there was another line that really paid true to that, was, I don't know how we protect people when hatred is coming from all sides.
Hatred is coming from all sides.
That's going down in history as a Doctor Who line for me forever. I will reference that for a long time, because it is so good. This episode, for me, it played so well. Nerdy Chap, you've been quiet all this time, so I want you to jump in and give a little review of it too.
Well, the one thing is I was going to say is, to jump onto this, the major themes is that of prejudice. And funny enough, and I don't know if you saw it, not only prejudice of the historical situation, because the historical situation in this episode is Partition Day, which was August 15th, 1947, when Pakistan became its own separate country. part of a lot of political dealings and things in the fight for a free India. This is involving the times of Gandhi. If you ever watch the movie Gandhi with Ben Kingsley playing the role, it actually goes into the history of the fight for Indian independence, as well as also the creation of Pakistan. And it does also go into the amount of violence that occurred not only amongst the citizens and against the British, but against one another, which is what this episode was also highlighting. That brother is turned against brother.
Yeah.
And
that's actually exactly
like
what happened.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's why like we had to take a moment afterwards because it's really funny. I wish that we actually had Arjun in to be able to review this because he's a resident DG member for anyone that doesn't know who that is. He has actually written most of his poems. Actually, his most recent poem is literally about partition.
About partition. Yep.
And so, and when he does actually write, he does talk to both of us and we we give feedback. And so it was really really interesting because I never actually really. We don't go over Indian history ever in school here, so I don't really know that much about it. So it was actually cool to have just recently learned about it and then see it reflected in this episode. And I actually, in the first few minutes of watching it, texted a friend and was like, I was already tearing up, and I literally never would have expected to have seen any piece of media, at least American or British media or like sci-fi media or anything that I watch, to portray not even that moment in history, but just culture, culturally speaking, just that brotherly feud. So beautifully done. I think it was very respectful and
it's what they call a tearing asunder.
Yeah.
Because in the reflection, I know we interrupted you, Nerdy Chap, sorry about that, but I'm sure you can kind of guess that Joe and I might have a little bit of thoughts today.
That's why I'm being quiet most of the time.
No, sorry about that. No, you were right. You were speaking about, I'll go back to what she's saying because she's completely on point. But during the time of the partition, the people didn't actually ask for it, right? It was something that was done, that was instigated by the British Empire and Lord Mountbatten, who they actually reference in the movie very clearly, and they actually give a soundbite during and I said a movie, and I will say that because I kept saying to Joe as I was watching it, I feel like I'm watching a movie. And you were so right, because the Bollywood-esque nature of it, Lewis, kind of lent so much to me, just completely falling in love with the stylizing of it.
Big testament to the cinematography, but then also, the directing on that to make 40 minutes feel like a movie. That's
just beyond phenomenal. And the sound bites that he used, historical sound bites, I was like, oh my God, you couldn't have just, for people who know the story, can you imagine? For people like me who somewhat know the story, to Joe who kind of knows the story, and to you guys who know it, but maybe didn't ever feel that connection, and yet we all connected. I think, I'm hoping.
100%. Like it made me tear up because of it. Yeah.
Well, what I was going to say is about the thing I was going to finish up about prejudice is there's two levels of prejudice going on. One is the historical situation, which I know needed to be brought up for the sake of the episode. The other, and what I was going to say is, I don't know if you caught it, is the Doctor's own prejudice towards the aliens.
Yeah.
Because at first, you think they're the villains, but they're not.
Mm-mm.
And so there's even inherent prejudice that when we see alien, we think that's the monster of the week. They're the villain. And they weren't the villain. So it's playing on both sides of not only the historical of prejudice, but also how even the doctor thought, oh, well, these are assassins. That's what they do. And then they shared the whole story of, no, we were assassins, but we came back to our planet and it was destroyed. And now we are witnesses so that no one dies alone to remember this time of mourning. And I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, I think that was an amazing tidbit in there. Not tidbit, but
tidbit.
Like just underlying theme for Doctor Who fans to really dig into. I mean, I don't know about classic fans or long-term fans, but I think these are my new favorite race of alien that we come across, because they were depicted so honorably, and I just felt such a like embodiment of respect through them, like this reverence that they had about them for life and the universe, and just the fact that that's what they dedicate their existence to. I mean, the whole story, it's so tragic, and I think it's something that, like Richard said, that prejudice that was immediately there prevented the Doctor from seeing and empathizing with a race that the Doctor would most empathize with, I think, of almost any race that they've ever come across.
Yeah, 100% agree.
I
think your favorite part was that the aliens, your favorite character in this episode were the aliens because of how impactful they were. Mine was Prem. The way that Shane Zaza did this role, oh my gosh, from the moment that he started the whole episode being on the what do you call it, the wagon, and then his little sarcastic little tidbit that he tells the companions, the guy with the flowers, the one that's marrying. I was like, oh, that is so great. And then his character, that he fought in the war. He knew what he was fighting, trying to just live his life. He wasn't fighting for a just cause or anything like that. He was literally just fighting because he was forced to. He had to. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then his own brother was fighting him on this cause and telling him, you have to stand up and change this. And he's like, no, I've seen where this goes. I know what's next, and it's not good.
I mean, the retrospective that we're getting in 40 minutes goes beyond, I think, anything we could have ever have even imagined, because you're getting political factionism, you're getting political rhetoric, you're getting brainwashing, you're getting prejudiced, exactly like the nerdy chap said. You're getting the Doctor herself, sitting inside of her prejudice against the being without understanding who that being is now, and the fact that she judged them by the actions of the prior,
just the stories,
the stories that she'd heard, when she never actually knew anything about them today, which was not normal for the Doctor. But let's be clear, the Doctor has done this, has acted with prejudice on multiple occasions, and in doing so has caused harm to others. So this, I think, and I think actually in memoriam for Doctor Who, that's the Doctor having to look within and say, I'm so sorry, I was wrong.
To be fair, I mean, the Doctor definitely did go with, I mean, historically, like what they knew, but then also thought that with what Prem had said, that they really did kill his brother as well. So I can see that there was that level of, okay, like, yeah, no, these are bad people, but the moment that they explained everything to the Doctor and she realized what she'd done, I don't know if everyone caught it, but the gesture that she did with her hand immediately.
Yes.
That was the moment that I felt like, oh my gosh, this is such a, like, it like exuded respectfulness and honor, and I thought that it was really brilliantly done, because it doesn't matter what it was in reference to. It was it was just very reflective of how
Respect.
respect and understanding is applied to anything, your culture, your religion, your like
Culture, your religion,
yeah, like it was a very wonderful
spirituality,
moment. And
your belief.
I have to say, actually, my favorite character of the episode was Prim as well, by the way. But as soon as like we saw him and he was charming, I was like, okay, he's gonna die.
That is the trend.
That's the trend. Oh, we found.
I wanted to bring up some more stuff. The thing is so that we do know, yes, the brother is involved with political prejudice because the political prejudice at that time, there was a group of Indian nationalism, India first, which is what the little brother is actually drawn up into. His whole anger towards his middle brother, because his older brother died in the war, is that whereas his middle brother fought so that he can come back home and marry his bride is Muslim. And amongst them, when you see the marriage and everything like that occurs in the episode between them, you see them uniting cultures, uniting faith, uniting love together, which the little brother found abhorrent because he thought even tainting oneself with the other faith, the other religion, is just wrong, which is why he betrayed his brother. He killed a holy man in the episode because he was trying to prevent the marriage from happening.
Which, by the way, as a pure Hindu, is a sin of massive proportions. So, and understanding the culture and the historical era that we're talking about, that his factionism and his racism had gotten, his nationalism, but really racism had gotten to that, had reached that level of ferocity.
I mean, you can.
It's a perfect representation of why the genocide that we see occur.
Yeah,
does
occur. The
100,000
that were lost. He does justify it though. He says. I mean, not that it's to himself. It's just justifiable. He said it was better to have killed him and let whatever happened to himself than to have let the sadhu, in his words, quote unquote, defile himself by taking action. And I thought it was actually. I haven't read any reviews. I don't know what anyone else thinks, whether they're within the culture or not. But I actually think that it was handled beautifully. I mean, the fact that it was written by an Indian that not just was willing, but made sure to put on the forefront, listen, we were not brothers at this time. This was a time when we literally killed our own brethren, and reflected it, like, honestly, so tragically but so beautifully. I thought it was a perfect representation, and it's something that a lot of people don't even realize. Honestly, within our culture itself, if you're multiple generations down, but say I'm going to go back, but like say with Arjun, his parents are from India, so he's not many generations removed, and his parents have that level of prejudice. And well, not that level. Sorry.
No, wrong word.
Sorry,
wrong. I'm sorry. Take that back.
I take that back. His parents have a level of prejudice because
it's inherent in their culture
exactly,
and their upbringing.
It's the same way that everyone has a sort of prejudice that's passed on. That's something that actually hasn't completely gone away. So I can only imagine that this actually sparked a lot of conversation in the Pakistani and Indian communities of Doctor Who fans. I'm actually very curious to see what the thoughts are in the country.
I think we should go on and look at exactly the reviews in in those countries. Would be amazing, or across the UK. I was going to say to you that Manisha's characterization of his being, it was a perfect example of what happens when we allow that rhetoric of absolutism to reign, right? We end up with genocide. We end up with mass murders. And basically what they were doing, the soldier who shoots Preem, he fought side by side with him to free their people from the British Empire. But that same soldier who knows the heart and the soul of Preem was so willing to pull that trigger simply because Preem had married a Muslim.
Loved the wrong person.
Had loved the wrong person. Can you wrap your mind around that, and that we are getting that story from Doctor Who, and that the writers are allowing us to be able to receive that story in such a different way? And I will, as always, say that Doctor Who has brought this type of beautification and revelation and enlightenment to us now for 50 years. And it just keeps happening more and more. But for me, in my 30-something years of watching this show, did I ever think I would sit here and actually have something so meaningful to my own history presented to me in this way? I hope so. I did.
Legit would have never thought to have seen this mixed with sci-fi. I really think the depth of this episode, honestly, in my opinion, is the most of any of the ones that we've seen so far, just because it handles so much. It actually has a really wonderful sci-fi side to it. I love the scene when the doctor was like, I need this, and I love biscuits. And really
chicken poo. I was like, what?
And then they're like, what's this for? I was like, oh, science. And then she goes, science. And I was like, this is science.
This is literally what happened. We were watching it, and Jyoti's like, it's for science. And then the doctor goes, well, it's science.
And I was like,
that was so cute. It was so adorable.
We hardly get to see the doctor do science anymore. Remember, the doctor is a brilliant, genius scientist. So I'm seeing that. I know I'm kind of rambling a bit, but I think that there's just so many different parts of it, even the levels of which it addresses different themes of things that can relate to currently, but then also I feel like this, I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, oh yes, social justice, blah, 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 whatever, as in they think that every episode's been doing, but I think a little bit different from the Rosa Parks episode. This one was, I think, a little bit more deeply rooted in not necessarily history, but in being a little bit more, fictional, more so the sci-fi side of it. I think the Rosa Parks episode felt a little bit more historical, and that's why I think this one felt
think they sensationalized it or did anything in the sense that would make it a social justice warrior thing or anything like that. The way that they handled this was very subtle. It was very subdued, and it was very moderate. And it's the same way that they handled the Rosa Parks episode. They handled it right down the middle, and they stuck to the middle. They didn't lean towards any of the political sides, which is good because it doesn't it doesn't put anybody off in the sense of oh, I have a political affiliation, I will not watch this, type of thing. I love how they did this because it allows people that even if they have those prejudices, they might be willing to watch this. And that's where change happens, is when we see things like this that are right down the middle and that they open this conversation up to people that normally will not be open to listening to a conversation. And I love that.
I want to continue down this path, but I do want to sidetrack it for a moment since we do have Nisha here, our geek mom, and Jyoti, that I wanted to ask this question. The necklace around Prem's neck, I think that's of Hanuman.
Yeah.
How much does that play a part into his character? Because I'm assuming you know far more, because you live it, of Hindu theology. So the role of Hanuman in this episode.
I think personally, I thought it was a very subtle. as much as they pointed out the prejudice between the religions, which was very real, everything about the prejudices displayed were all real, and even still relevant to today. So I thought it was a very actually interesting, very subtle mark to just even display, and I actually really like they did do that. Hanuman, very in specific, the depiction that they had of him, of
the murti.
I don't know if it's a murti because it's not necklace, but the necklace.
That's what it is.
Is a one of the more famous depictions of Hanuman when he's holding up
the Sanjeevani Mountains.
Yeah, the mountains, which is it's a representation of basically everything Hanuman embodied, which you can go into, I'd say, not just strength, but fortitude and loyalty and perseverance and
absolute devotion.
Yeah.
And not just absolute devotion,
love,
but pure absolute love, but such a depth of ethical and moral principle that Hanuman, as a deity, would call out God himself or herself if the actions were appearing to be unrighteous. So in the depiction that we see, the icon that he has wearing around his neck, Hanuman is holding the Sanjeevani Mountains, and the Sanjeevani Mountains were during the time of Lord of the tale of Rama and Sita, way back when, where it's a long story. So basically, the mountains were filled with magical elixirs, plants and herbs that today have become what we know as modern scientific medicine. From those herbs and plants that were on that mountain, all plants, all medication as we know it, the original essence of it, holistic and Ayurvedic medicine, came from that mountain. So he was carrying that mountain in order to save one of the main characters in the story of Lakshman, one of the main characters in the story of Rama and Sita. It's a long saga. So it's extremely important that he is wearing that necklace because it's a representation of his brother Kunal, who wore it as a protection and a source of identity for purification and for ethics and moral principle and pure love. And that Prem, whose name Prem means love, by the way, Prem means love, that, he's holding Hanuman dearest to him. It's very important and a very identifiable symbol of pure love and ethical and moral principle. So thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, what I was getting at was that I think that it was a very minute symbolism there. I think that Patel probably put into there to have that specific Hanuman be associated with Prem, because the whole time I just kept thinking whenever we saw Prem, like his eyes just and his demeanor, he just was, I felt so warm just watching him, and I felt like he was just this embodiment of love. And I love Umbreen.
Oh my God!
Like, I know we haven't even gotten to her, but
no.
But Prem was, I think he was such a character of what I think the embodiment of like righteousness and love is and should be. And
is often the case, as we've been seeing, these characters don't survive in the season of Doctor Who. So
what I wanted to jump in real quick on that, since you said don't survive, yes, is, see, for me, I looked it up real quick online just to like what is that necklace, and found Hanuman. I'm like, okay, and I saw that, yeah, it's supposed to be strength, and to me, when I got to that part where he confronted his little brother with the horsemen and the riders, with the horses and the riders and everything like that, that I thought that really played into his bravery and strength of character to stand against, as he said, I have demons of my own to face.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a good symbolic use. And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I'm like, Because I'm wondering, like, how intentional was that?
Honestly, I hope to goodness they bring this director back, because I've never, at least as far as I know, I've never seen anything of his before, but I am enthralled.
Enthralled.
Actually, the director is a woman. From
Oh,
what I saw in the writer is Vinay Patel. That's the writer. I think the director is a woman.
I have it open on my thing here. So the symbolism is pretty much intertwined from the moment this episode opens through the end. Even the moment, and we haven't even touched on Umbreen. And if we're going to talk favorite characters, I'm not sure that I want to say favorite characters, because I think that the Thajarians touched me in a way that brought me to absolute almost tears. Who they were, because I couldn't hate them, and I watched everyone else running around going, "Oh my God, they're bad guys, they're demons," and I kept thinking, but no, because oftentimes we have these beings and they're bad. Everyone says they're bad, but they're not just out there killing people. Something else is going on. I just didn't feel it. I felt that there was more to them. And so let me tell you the moment, and I think we can go into favorite moments from it a little later. I won't do it right now, but Umbreen for me, as a strong, extremely righteous, extremely equanimous and open-minded character for the age that she's from, and her mother. Wow, that her mother supports her in this way.
Mm-hmm.
That her mother,
she had her misgivings, but she was still supportive.
But she raised Prem and Manish and Kunal just like they were her own children. And this is what you learn when they take their marriage vows, and Umbreen is offering Manish the laddu. By the way, the laddu, the sweet that she offers him and says, "Let me feed you," that sweet is the favorite sweet of Hanuman. Just so you understand. No, Ganesh and Hanuman, honey. It's perfectly fine.
And
it's really Ganesh, but Hanuman.
I do have to say, like, I mean, I know we're jumping all around, but culturally, like, it was just little things here and there. Honestly, like the rope tie of the hands. And I love that they were so
the malas,
like modern about how, well, we're doing things our way for us because we're us, and I found it absolutely brilliant. Yeah, the malas. Oh, Graham putting it on him.
Graham putting the mala. The mala is the flower necklace, by the way.
Yeah, and then specifically though, yeah, what you were just saying about that laddu, it's a very it's very common for during your during not even just weddings, but like I believe it's a symbol usually when you actually offer to your younger siblings and your older siblings, just your siblings in general, is that specific sweet. So
it's just very common to offer during this time. And by the way, last Wednesday was Diwali, so it was kind of interesting that it came out in the same week. This was also filmed. This was also aired during a holy time. Just a thought to put out there.
I thought it was interesting that it was better.
So this was aired during Diwali?
During the holy time. It's still the days of
last week.
The last week of the holy days.
So it would have been. It's the closest it could have been to it, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was just interesting that they reflected even the war scenes, and then it just made me think that it was Veterans Day at the time.
I know, and then I thought that too because the war scene. Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah,
I don't know if they planned that out, but I thought that was very.
Well, I also wanted to say that they planned it. What they referenced, the partition. You know, BBC. This is BBC America, BBC One that this airs on, but on BBC Two over the last 2 years, they actually did a series called The Partition, where they interviewed people about intimately about the details of the partition. So it had already been aired. It had been aired over the last 2 years. So it, for anyone watching BBC, would probably have already had this kind of already in their thoughts or minds, because they were bringing the truth of the story, I guess, to the forefront. So just another little tidbit there. I know we're jumping all over. So sorry, so sorry to the listeners.
I honestly, I think that's also a testament to the episode. There's just so much. It was so full of such beautiful things to talk about. I can't. We haven't even touched the Doctor or Ryan and Graham, and I think that. Oh my God, we're still even. I'm still thinking just about the little things, just the little nuances of how they subtly put the culture here and there. The Mendi, which is the henna that gets put on the hands. I love that they made it
so bad.
And she pointed it out too. And then the Nani, when they got back, she was like, such horrible Mendi, like such horrible designs. Because it really, normally wedding Mendi is very elaborate.
Yeah.
So it was really funny to see that, and that.
Yeah, you should have seen mine.
I think my favorite little part with the Doctor was like comedic part was when she was putting it on, and she said, "What did you say? I never got to do this as a man."
Yeah, I never got to do this as a man.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And then speaking of the Doctor, my favorite part with the Doctor was well, aside from the immediate apology and then the respect once with the hand gesture when she realized what that she took was the wedding vows.
Yes, agreed. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm the one thing I wanted to say real quick is a lot of the stuff that you guys are both geeking out over about all the Indian culture things is that makes me happy, because that was actually going to be one of my first questions to you was how well did they actually represent Indian culture? Because whenever something like the BBC decides to do of a different culture, I'm always like, okay, British, how well are they going to represent? And the sheer fact that they did very well is great. Fantastic.
Well, it's written by an Indian, so yeah. I'm hoping he got that and directed by hopefully someone.
Like we started out and I saw, Patel, okay, well, I guess, okay, I hope so. Here we go. And then little by little, I was like, okay. And then looking back, it's like, but it wasn't really something that we paid too much attention to in the moment, because I just think it was that well done that we weren't able to see like, oh my God, no, like that's not how it goes. Like if it were bad, we would have noticed it.
Oh yes.
Yeah, no.
Well, that's a testimony to the culture there. I think that answered it, Nerdy Chap.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying, like, white boy Christian American doesn't know all this of Hindu culture. And that's why I'm like, okay, you guys live this. How well did he do? Because I know if it was, say, in a Christian setting and I was able to see things off, I'd be like, yep, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. But it's not. So that's why I was like, were you seeing any faults on that? But I'm glad that you didn't. So that's a plus. Sure. That means that BBC is getting better.
It was definitely nuanced to be extremely subtle. And you have to also understand something.
Very British.
That it was very British, exactly. Let me just explain that in the location that they were shooting, and that they were referencing this farm area, it was poor. Umbreen very clearly explains it when she's giving her speech as now an older sister to Manish, which is what she is, because traditionally when you wed the older brother, that the bride becomes your bhabhi, and now they accept you as your younger brother, which is why she does the feeding. And in those moments, she's explaining that without Manish, they would never have existed. Can you imagine? You need to understand she's referencing the poverty of that area at the time, that they had so little, that they had almost nothing and would have died in any other circumstance. So we're looking at the subtlety of the costuming and of the home that they live in. And to be fair, I would imagine it would be that sparse. And that's the scarcity would have been an issue.
I thought it was actually really brilliant. I guess, directing choice to keep it simple. Immediately, I only thought it once, though. I was like, okay, so we're all just having British accents and fairly posh-esque clothes, or being a little bit in poverty. But then it's like, okay, well, it's Doctor Who, and the TARDIS does the auto translation, and then it also, at least I think it does it, masks their, like, updates their clothes to match the era, I believe, as well. I'm not sure if that's...
Yeah. The psychic paper can do all of that. Not that they talk about it in this moment, but all of that can happen.
So I was shocked at that.
Yeah, the one thing is what I also see is why I said, like, you know, BBC is getting better, is compare this episode to Fourth Doctor, Talons of Wei Chung, and you see the growth. When you have, like, white guy playing Asian man, that could be very offensive by today, to how well this is done in detail about Indian culture, you definitely see the growth. That now in 2018, we're like, okay, things have changed dramatically. It's awesome. Granted.
And the interesting thing is you keep saying the Indian culture, and you have to.
Well, also Muslim culture. Can't forget that the Muslim or Pakistani. Yeah, Pakistani.
I had to keep catching myself because honestly, it's something that's unfortunately very common. It's like we just say Indian, and I never think Pakistani, because I'm sorry to any Indian Pakistani viewers out there, but I think of it as
we're all one.
So I know it's not. I know there's many people who still very much are about that separation.
We were raised with the philosophy of unity, but it
was actually really interesting because I did reference it at one point to Mom. I was like, imagine having, when my grandmother watched this, I don't know her story. It was very weird because I kind of felt like Yaz a little bit, because I know her story. She talks a lot about her past, but in regard to the religious testament, my grandmother was Muslim, was raised Muslim, but then married a Hindu, and it wasn't even in, what was that, like in
the 60s?
It was not.
It was in the 50s, honey. I was born in 1966.
Okay, so it was the 50s.
My sister was born in 55. My parents were born just past their 60th anniversary.
Yeah,
64th anniversary.
So in the 50s, I'm sure you can imagine after
65th anniversary. I apologize.
Just after the partition, not too long, that it wasn't, even in a completely different country, it was not something that was looked at well.
So my mom was born in 1954. Excuse me, she was married in 1954, 7 years after partition. My family is from a country where the British had indentured our people. Most of us were from from northern India, and across the line that then became Pakistan versus India. So the country that you're seeing, that line in partition you're seeing, is where my people are from. That is where we're from. And in the time you're seeing this exist, which is 7-8 years prior to my mother being married, my people had already been stolen out of the country. So there's a very strong poignancy for someone like me who always looks at my history and wonders, Yeah. Because I know that's something that was very relevant to my life. So it's really, I didn't mean to talk about that, but it did occur to me. So.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I wasn't referencing a lot of Pakistani because I didn't know if you guys actually had Pakistani background. So, because I've always known you as Indian. So that's where I was like, because again, as I'm saying, admitting myself, white American Christian, white boy, that I don't know all Muslim cultures. I don't know all, like, traditions, way you handle the faith of Islam. So I never want to say I'm an expert on it. No way, shape, or form. Which again is why I was asking you about the expertise of Hindu and
Well, the
Hindi
interesting
culture
is,
and Indian and all that.
I was actually raised universal, as I spoke. I'm raised with a Hindu primarily, Sanatan Dharma. I am actually was raised in Islam as well, and I'm also raised as a Christian. Just so you understand, because of the faith we're from, because of the area we're from. So I was raised in everything, which is a very unusual thing, as you well know. So I am versed in a lot of it, but culturally speaking, if I was to go to certain places, I would not be accepted because I fall outside of a lot of boxes. So now we're digressing from the story, which I don't want that to be what our review is about. But, if the fans and the listeners are getting a really good insight into my background, yay!
This is important because that's what this episode strikes upon. So this is something that needs to be addressed because, this episode brought this topic up. And I think it's important that, obviously, this is your background. This needs to be brought up and it needs to be, your insight on this is more than either nerdy chap or I could say.
Yeah, that's what I'm admitting. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to come out here and say, I know this. No, I don't.
Honestly, and that's the thing. I feel that I actually feel the same. I mean, it's not the same level, but I don't know anything about Pakistani history or culture. I hardly know anything about Muslim culture and the faith of Islam, aside from the general principles, not traditions. And at the time, in 1947, India, I have no idea essentially what the cultural environment was there. I speak, I guess, more so from this perspective of, I guess, where Yaz is coming from and seeing things from a completely different perspective, which is why I had that thought of like, okay, I wonder, if my grandmother were not in the country she was, or at least maybe there's things I don't even know that she didn't know.
Oh, I'm sure. And that's the thing, that when you have a family that's migrated from a different area into the United States, the culture and the stories are one of the most fascinating things. A lot of times I remember having a lot of stories too, and I love that this is the approach that this story took. Was this is just a grandmother sharing a story, or lack thereof sharing a story, and this is what made Yaz want to go back in history and see what actually happened. And then all these events unfold in what I could only describe as completely Doctor Who-esque. This is like the epitome of Doctor Who in every way.
You have it. Exactly.
Can we just address the beginning? Yaz is asking the doctor, and we know how the doctor is with their companions, and they can give in sometimes. And then the doctor was like, "I'm just too nice."
Yeah, I'm just too nice sometimes. Yes, you are.
Cute. But I did love that little part in there where it was like, doctor was like, why? Because the doctor started to interfere, and the grandma were like, what's happening? And Yaz is like, well, why are you doing this? And the doctor is like, well, if this doesn't happen, then you're not born into existence, and if there's no Yaz, then there's no universe.
No, we can't have a universe with no Yaz.
Yeah, we can't have Yaz. And I was like, that was so cute. Honestly, in that moment, I was like, oh, the doctor really loves her companion.
Yeah, my little side comment about that is just more of, I'm just happy that this didn't turn out to be a Father's Day episode like with Rose, and we got to see a return of those bad CGI creatures. So yay, they preserved the timeline and didn't have them show up.
And honestly, I will say, random sidetrack, but the aliens, they were beautiful. That makeup,
that was really cool.
The FX, yeah,
that was beautiful.
From head to toe, that design was just eloquent.
like
elegant.
The costuming and then the sculpting. Oh, they
Yeah.
were so gorgeous.
With all the multiple eyes and everything.
Yeah, well, they're alien bat creatures, is what it looks like, from what I could see.
They look like spiders, actually. The spider eyes.
The only bad joke, you know what? I'll make a bad joke, which is just simply this. It's the return of the Batman. Ah! There you go.
You're so silly. Yeah, that's an epic fail, mister. Epic fail.
Cue the Batman music. No, 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 no. Alien.
I was
like moments.
Oh my God, yeah.
So I just remembered, Louis, you said it like a long time ago. You mentioned it, but it was my favorite quote as well that Graham said to Yes. To live in this moment. I don't have the full quote. I didn't write it down.
You have to learn to live in the moment.
Yes, that line is just wonderful, and
we have to learn to live in the moment. And there's a line that Umbreen says, and I just really can't speak enough to the actress who plays Umbreen.
Oh, yeah.
If you understand that they're trying to tell you that they're giving you this character who is not just resilient, she's resounding, she is confident, she's absolute in this trust one in Prem, in her love for Prem, in the right to love Prem, and her life and her life choices. And you think back that Vinay Patel is giving us a character like this in 1947, who is Pakistani, by the way, and you just need to understand how probably unrealistic that would have been, but yet at the same time, how amazing it would be if that was a truth and a reality. Because of how difficult it was, of course, to be a woman at that time, regardless of faith or spirituality.
Okay. I was wondering, I was like, I don't think it's unrealistic in terms of having, a woman, Pakistani woman, have those qualities at the time, but definitely, I guess, to have honestly, no, yeah. There's actually been movies like that before, and there are stories
like Mother India. I thought of Mother India throughout this entire thing, but anyway, that's just a very beautiful classic Indian film.
Films that Bollywood films that touch on this subject of tradition end up being romance stories, because if you think about it, what is the only power that would transcend that border and that nationalism? It would be love, the power of love, and that's what all the stories end up being about. And I think that Umbreen, if you compare her to what we've seen from Yaz and then Yaz's mom, I think that they did a brilliant job, kind of tying in the family there, and the qualities that we see reflected through the.
And you understand Yaz, because Umbreen says, "I don't care about tradition, about being respectable. I don't care what everyone said. It's a new future, and we make our own traditions now."
I was
like,
that was
1947? What? No wonder Yaz is who she is, and Yaz's mom is this brilliant, confident, career goal, minded woman. Look at this. It sets the pace for this entire family, and for Yaz's, I would say, ingenuity and just her resolution and her confidence.
Her badassness. Let's say it, guys. Badassness.
There you go, badassness.
Honestly, Umbreen, I would love her as a companion. Like, just
oh my God,
like,
get Umbreen on the TARDIS. Can you imagine? She'd be telling the world what to do. There was a really poignant but difficult line that I kind of paraphrased a little. That Prem says this, and it was such a revealing line, where he says that Kunal died trying to draw the line, and Manish believes a line needed to be drawn. Yeah. It's basically paraphrasing what the difference was and why Manish had gotten to where he was. And I thought about that, and I was like, oh my God, it's like, I'm sorry, I just jumped to it because it was in my absolutely, favorite moments in terms of lines. Because I thought that it summed up the controversy, basically.
That really does. It's a beautiful line, and I know we're running really long on this episode because there's so
I'm
much to say
sorry.
about it. But I wanted to wrap up basically and see everybody's final thoughts on this. Nerdy Chap, start off with you, since I know we've been kind of in the background this episode because there's been so much awesome stuff that Diversely Geek has brought to the table in this episode.
The main thing I would say is what I like about this episode is the message, which is, I kind of like Prem's line about, about how we focus on the differences and not what unites us. And that is very poignant even in today. I know from the last episode I talked about, since it was election time, think about when you go to those polls about being lights in the darkness, whichever way you may choose. And still, even in today, as far as American culture, that concept of that we are way too focused on what separates us, whether it's race, religion, our political party, all these things, when we need to start uniting on what keeps us common of just being simply human beings. And I like that focus of we need to, focus not so much on what's going to divide us, which brings about war, bloodshed, and all these things, and prejudice, but instead what unites us. And I think that is the main message that I like, that I love this episode for, and we need to focus on more.
Good call. Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. I think that, at the core of all the world's problems.
Yep, I 100% agree. Jody, what are your final thoughts on the episode overall?
Everything I've already said. Oh gosh, I think my thoughts kind of fall in line with the doctor's speech, kind of when she was doing the wedding, and how that the power of love is really one that transcends everything. And the doctor was like, if there's one thing that they believe in, and one thing that they have faith in, it's love. And I think that relates to the message that Nerdy Chap was just, explaining. And I think that it was extremely relevant. And we have to remember that these were written a very long time, a fairly long time ago. And the fact that they are relevant and probably always will be relevant is really emotional. I guess my overall with this episode is really just, I have not seen such a culturally beautiful piece of media in so long. And for Doctor Who, I think it was just a gift to everyone, and I appreciate that this era of Doctor Who is something that is connecting audiences in a way that we may not have been connected before. And I truly feel that the message overall has really fallen in line with basically what the Nerdy Chap kind of ends up bringing up each episode, and that's this hope and this love and this perseverance, and that's what the Doctor embodies. And I just absolutely, I think the overwhelming amount of love in this episode is really what made me tear up the ending in particular, where they turned away and we didn't get it for the first time. When we didn't get this sense of resolve, it felt right.
Yep.
For me.
I agree with you 100%. How about you, Nisha?
The Doctor has, from the beginning, always been burdened with the knowledge that I just can't even imagine. of knowing when it's okay to and when it's not okay to interfere or to change something. And there are two moments I think that extremely stand out to me, and I guess I would love that message to be understood, or maybe three, but very quickly. When the Thajarians speak about giving up their past as assassins and now being witnesses to humanity and honoring the lost worlds that were destroyed like theirs, and now they travel beyond across all of time and space and honor life as it passes. All I could think, well, that's the Doctor, right? Isn't that who the Doctor is? Yeah. And isn't that the reason that we fell in love with the Doctor? Because even though maybe the Doctor never says this is what his message or her message or meaning or the purpose is, I feel like that's what the Doctor is, right? And I thought in that moment, when they looked up and, when in the moment that we see Prem become one with the dust of all of those, millions of beings, and you look up and you see all of these beings and you realize in that moment, every single being is one. They're all the same. They're all from the same light. They're all part of the same dust and the billions of DNA fragments that make up the existence of the universe. And in that moment, you get this perfect, absolute representation of our unity. And that we start in the same place and we go back to the same place. And all we should wish in our life is that when we leave it, that we should be honored in this way. And that's what I was just, it hit me. It hit me very hard in that moment. And then the other moment that was probably most relevant, but just as relevant, that in a completely different way, is in the moment that they all have to turn and walk away as they listen to that shot being fired, and they know. Yep. And all they want to do is inside themselves is to turn around. But you look at their faces and you know that they have to accept that. And they have to accept his loss. And because in the long run, it's for the greater good, or it's to protect. It's a fixed point in time, and they have to protect the timeline. Yep. And what is that elegant and an eloquent representation of life and existence? There are things we can't change, but damn it, the things we can change, we should. Yeah. Especially 100%. When we know what we're changing is going to save minds and lives and hearts. So
I think that's the hardest part to do in society, and I'm glad that this type of show, this science fiction show that has such an influence on young minds in Britain and in the US, and this is basically going to allow those children to be raised with these type of beliefs as well. The impact that this has on this generation that's coming to be now it's going to be impactful. And I love that Doctor Who is doing this because it's necessary and it's much needed.
I just say, I was tearing up most of the episode, but when they turned and they walked away,
yeah,
and then it led into Prem's face, being ascended into all the other faces, and then kind of being grounded in that reality that there are millions of people that need them because they
die alone.
They do die alone.
Yep.
It was heavy.
That scene at the end with the floating faces, that
that's
impactful.
Yeah, that's wow. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever forget that imagery.
No,
it was beautiful. It was tragic. It was
now that on that note, obviously this is definitely a day that's going to be remembered for more than one reason. Monday, November 12th, this was the day that Stanley died. So I wanted to see if everybody wanted to give a few words and a quote, whatever the case is. I said mine already, but let's go around again. Nerdy Chap, if you want to start off.
Right now, I don't know how much I want to give a quote or something of words stuff, because I just think a lot of people are still in shock. All I know is what I posted on my Facebook page and stuff was what to my friends and everything, and what I'll probably post for Twitter or whatever is all I can hear is taps playing, and all I can see is the entire Marvel universe gathered at Stan Lee's grave.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Nisha?
Well, Joe really created two absolutely beautiful posts in Diversely Geek today, which I'll probably let her reference, but she we posted a quote from Stan Lee himself about Marvel, and I loved it. I just thought it was so brilliant because it literally explains who we are and why we sit here today and why we do geek podcasts and why we're just the nerds that we are. The quote she wrote was, Marvel is a cornucopia of fantasy, a wild idea, a swashbuckling attitude, an escape from the humdrum and prosaic. It's a serendipitous feast for the mind, the eye, and the imagination, a literate celebration of unbridled creativity, coupled with a touch of rebellion and an insolent desire to spit in the eye of the dragon. This is how Stan Lee, the master himself, explained his creation. And I read it and I thought, my God, this is why I am who I am today.
How about you, Jody?
Honestly, sorry about that, guys. Honestly, it when I first heard it, and every time I think about it, the only thing that comes to my mind is just Excelsior, just straight up, just Excelsior, and I never understood completely why he always said it. I just thought it was just his thing. Eventually, it just became his thing. But then I don't know. Just it feels like now it just feels very poignant in that it means basically like ever upward, like an onward. And I just think that it's a very relevant statement to himself and to life, and just kind of just Excelsior. Honestly, that's the biggest one for me. He has so many beautiful quotes and and sayings, and I just really, at the end of the day, Stanley always said that that adults, comic books for adults are kind of our place and where we go to have our imagination and our creativity, and I like that he basically always acknowledged that people have always loved things that are bigger than life, things that are imaginative, and I think that's just why we're geeks.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So I just wanted to say thank you, everybody that joined us. Obviously, this was an impactful episode for everybody, and I think it was a good episode, honestly. So I know we're signing off on a kind of sad note and all that stuff, but it's it shouldn't be a sad note. It should be a thought for contemplation and for not just mourning, but also appreciating the life and the work that this man brought to the table. Excelsior!
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 So everybody, thank you from Man Bites Media and Diversely
Geek.
and the Nerdy Chap, of course. That's for sure. Also, so if you guys have subscribed to Man Bites Media, you got to go on Diversely Geek, subscribe to that channel, because you'll be able to see all this amazing content that we're bringing you on their channel as well. And it is fantastic stuff that's in the works. So you guys will definitely like this if you are enjoying these Doctor Who episodes. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Doctor Who in Review.